Hey guys, so I'm sitting in my car waiting for the vet to open so I can get the medicine for my dog. He's fine. He's just allergic to like everything in my house, but he's fine.
Maybe.
Anyways, I started this video with the intention of being like, even if you only have 5 minutes here and there, you can still find time like this right here, right now, to study and learn a language. It may take you longer than everyone else, but it is still possible. And it kind of turned into more of a, this is how I study Korean and how I used to study Korean video. So check the description for links to resources that I mention and timestamps for the things that I talk about. And please remember that I'm basically just like upper beginner, lower intermediate-ish kind of level. My pronunciations are still bad because I don't have anyone to talk to. I don't have time to watch dramas. Like, it takes me on average 3 to 4 days to watch one episode, and the longest it's taken was a whole week. So yeah. And also remember that aside from pronunciations that I could have mistranslations and things that I mentioned, but that's not what this video is about, so I didn't like cross-check certain things because it's just about how I study. So I hope that you find something helpful in this video and that it's not a complete waste of your time. So let's go. So when I got this book a couple years ago, I only read the first few chapters and never touched it again. So I randomly opened it towards the back, and the stories get longer and more complicated. So I'm going through and I'm highlighting all of the words that I don't know on the Korean side, and then I'm going through and I'm highlighting the corresponding word on the English translation side, and then I'm writing down any extra information I learned or just want to add at the top corner afterwards. Another thing I'm doing is that I'm reading these stories out loud to practice my speaking, but I can't show you that for copyright issues. I read a couple sentences from this book before for speaking and my Instagram got blocked, so yeah. So I don't really mention it in the following clips, but the way that I find study time is like when the kids are sidetracked watching TV, or they're playing a game, or they're eating. That's when I get the spare time here and there to study. So it's like 4 in the morning and I'm awake because the dogs woke me up. And I'll probably stay up for about an hour at least. Yesterday was a holiday, so I didn't do anything. Well, today's a holiday, but we did ours yesterday. And I got these books in yesterday, but I haven't had a chance to look through them yet, and I'm really excited about that. So I'll probably skim through them today. I don't know if I'll read anything or not, or if I'll just skim through them. And I've also got someone on Tandem that's been trying to message me, so I'll reply to them. They've been kind of speaking a mix of Korean and English. And my Kakao's not working, so I can't ask my language partner questions like I usually do, and I probably would. But that's what I'm going to do for now. So used to, though, like when I was very first learning Korean, if I woke up in the middle of the night for any reason, like if the dogs woke me up or I just had to pee or I was thirsty or whatever, I would stay up for at least an hour, usually more. I was only getting like 3 or 4 hours of sleep in the night. But I would go through my grammar books. My intermediate book is in the car, but I mostly used these. I started out with this series. I read this book to about chapter 9, whichever one it is where they cover time. Okay, so it was chapter 11. And then, I don't know, for some reason time was really hard for me in the beginning, I don't know why. And I found it frustrating, so I got to where I would just ask my language partner, how do I say things like, how do I say learning Korean is fun? And then I would think of other sentences like that, like describing a verb. And I would think of irregular examples, even if they didn't make any sense. And I'd be like, I know this doesn't make sense, but translate it anyways. And he actually would. And so I picked up grammar that way, actually. And after about 6 months, I picked up these books again to see what I could start learning. And he had taught me all of this crap in these 3 books. Like, he taught me how to talk about all this stuff. So then I got the Korean Grammar News series, and I knew all the beginner, my intermediates in the car. But that one, I would just like open it to a random page and just study that grammar point because I didn't know what else to study. So I would just, if I didn't know that point, that's what I would study. And then I would go to howtostudykorean.com and I use their example. They have a ton of example sentences, so you can pretty much pick up the grammar point just based on the types of sentences that they're saying. And they'll kind of like explain the nuance of certain sentences to you, especially if there's a similar grammar point, and so that side is really, really helpful. And then after I read all their example sentences, I try to think of at least 6, like 6 is my goal. I try to think of 6 sentences on my own and have them corrected, and if I use the grammar properly, then I consider it learned. Otherwise, I review it a little bit more and try to make more sentences until I feel comfortable with it. And that's how I studied grammar. And I have also decided to make some coffee. I'm gonna read that Dragons Are Not Dragons. And I don't know from there. I'll probably stay awake. My kid will be up soon, so I decided, why not? So today, I woke up at 7:30. Now it's 9:53, and the kids are still asleep. I had 4 kids yesterday, so all I did was confirm some stuff with my language partner about using Uri as and I wrote a blog on it. And today I finished watching Hotel Del Luna, and I responded on Tandem. And now I'm either going to read an English book or I'm going to read more culture stories, and that's all I was able to do yesterday. So yesterday I had 3 kids and we went and got our fish, so I didn't have time to do much. I did read 2.5 more chapters, but it was like a paragraph here and there. It wasn't like I sat there and read through an entire thing. But someone was talking to me and they said that they have to go to their plans Shildeso, and I knew what it meant because of the book, so I'm excited to keep reading more and picking up more vocab. And if that noise you hear is my dog. So yesterday I ended up being too busy. I didn't get a chance to watch anything in Korean. I didn't read anything in Korean. I didn't even listen to K-pop because my kid was like, not Korean. So the only thing I did do yesterday, this is something I do every day as a review. If I have a conversation in my head and I know the Korean vocabulary, I try to repeat the conversation in my head in Korean, and if I can't translate something, I'll ask my language partner about it, and I'll have fake conversations in my head, I'll pretend I'm meeting a friend for the first time in a while, or we're going somewhere, or we're at a restaurant ordering food, and just see how far I can get in a daily conversation. And I did think of a couple sentences yesterday that I wanted to ask about, but I didn't get a chance to note them down in any way, so I forgot them, and it's really stressing me out. So I'm hoping I remember, because I really wanted to ask about it, but I don't remember what it was. And I'm busy again today. I have to get my kid in an hour, so I think I'm going to scroll through some of my talkie tutors. I don't know if I'll get brave enough to message one, because my last tutoring experience, I didn't have a good one. I'm really shy and socially awkward, so it's hard for me to open up, and especially I'm not good at Korean and stuff, trying to listen and speak with a stranger that I don't know anything about or what to expect from them. And the last one I had, we talked for 20 minutes purely in Korean, even though I said I wanted 50% English and Korean because I was scared. And it got to the point I wanted to learn how to talk about directions. So she's like, well, how do you get from your house to the bank? And I'm like, I was trying to think, and I was like, all I could think was go straight, turn right, and then the bank will be on your right. But I didn't know what she was wanting from me, because I thought she would give me an example, this is how you get from A to B, now you tell me. But it wasn't like that, and I didn't know what to expect from tutoring. It was my first time, and in English she goes, oh, you didn't understand me, your face looks so scary. And I was like, thanks. So now I'm really scared to get another tutor, but yeah. But since I'm wanting to improve my listening and speaking really bad, and I know this will help, I know it will, I'm going to try to get brave enough to message somebody, and sometime by January start having tutoring sessions, so I guess we'll see. So none of the tutors that I liked used English in their intro, so I'm terrified to reach out to them, because what if I can't understand their Korean or their English? I would feel so bad. So my most favorite way of passively learning Korean is to listen to Korean music. It's mostly K-pop, but I listen to SoundCloud too. Anytime that I'm driving, or if I'm at work and I'm able to have my earbuds in, I will listen to Korean music rather than English music. I also translate songs that I really, really like, and I will at least do the chorus of songs I listen to a lot. And I have actually picked up a ton of vocabulary from doing this. The song I'm listening to is how I learned Miruda. That's probably very badly pronounced, but that's what I picked up from this song. And I also translate the photo cards that they write on. The majority of the stuff I have impressed Koreans by knowing has come from translating K-pop idol messages and their photo cards, so it's a fun way of doing it. And if you're just listening, it's passive, so it's not very active, so it's not stressful. So now that I'm at my daughter's school. I have 30 minutes to kill, so I will do my second favorite way to passively study Korean, which is scrolling through Instagram and other social medias. I personally do Instagram, but there's also like TikTok and stuff. If you can follow Koreans, so everything's in Korean, so you just read what you can and don't read what you can't. And when I actively learn with social media, I look up a word I find interesting or I don't know, which leads into me looking up other related words to that word. And then I will also scroll through and read like the little summaries of the articles, and I will look up more words from that, and sometimes you pick them up just from the context. And this was also literally all I did yesterday, was look up a handful of words and skim through articles, and that was all I had time to do. So today is a work day, and in the spirit of my lunch break, and I somehow miraculously get a break, I take at least one textbook, one regular reading book, and my notebook. And my notebooks are set up. I have several different ones, and they're all pretty much the same. I have one page where I write down sentences. Either I guessed them and I got them correctly, I said them incorrectly and they got corrected, or I had no idea how to say it and they taught me how to say it and I want to remember it. And then my vocabulary is sorted based on the source I learned it from. Because when I want to review something, I'll be like, I know I learned this from this song or this movie or this book, and I want to remember it, so I sort it by category that way. So for my actual textbooks though, I highlight and write like in the book, but I can't do that to an actual book, so I take my notebook to write down the vocabulary I learned from specific books, and I categorize it based on where I learned the word from. My reading books, I was reading this. I'm on page like 75. I've had to write down so many words. All the blue and black are from this. There's so many. I started trying to alphabetize it because I can't go back through and look. So I got the Demon Slayer series, and this is the current book I've been taking because it's a lot easier for me to read. Granted, it could just be that I'm familiar with the story because I've seen the anime in English. I also got these books in today. I read this one and it was super cute, so now I'm really excited to read this one, and that is what I will spend my lunch break doing. I will read this book on my lunch break. And I used to take this as my normal textbook because I'm trying to increase my vocabulary, but now that I have my culture books, I am going to take this as my textbook. So I'm going to take this book, my Demon Slayer book, my culture book, and I have been liking this notebook, so I am going to take it. So I also take the Japanese version of the Demon Slayer. My goal is to read the Korean and the Japanese side by side, and maybe I'll pick up a little Japanese. But there was one sentence that I remembered. It's just okiru in the past tense, okitaka, or however you say it, and it just means, did you wake up? Are you awake? But I was excited that actually, like, I even, without the furigana, I knew how it was read. And I learned it like 2 years ago, so I found that exciting. So this is my lunch break again. Whenever I'm passively studying from a book, I'll just read through it the best I can without taking notes. If there's too many unknown words that I can't understand the story, then I'll set it aside and find something else to do. When I'm actively studying from a book like I am right now, I will read the whole page and then I go back and write down the words that I didn't know, because for me it's too tedious to write down the word as I come to it. If I can guess the word from context, or I can understand what's going on without knowing that word, then I just move on to the next page. If I need to, like with that comic I showed you earlier where there's so many words that I don't know, I will write down all the words that I didn't know from that page, and then I will look up all of the words that I didn't know from that page, and then I will reread the page so that I can actually understand what's going on. I don't recommend this depending on how you study. For me, I don't mind the challenge, and the story's interesting enough to me that I don't care. There's a 5-finger rule my daughter's school uses. If there's more than 5 words that you don't know on a page, then it's too difficult for you to read, and you should find something else to read. It doesn't matter how many words are on the page, because lower level books have less words per page than higher level books, so it kind of goes hand in hand. So this book is like perfect for my reading level, and of course that comic I showed you earlier, I technically should not be reading that, but it doesn't stress me out, and so I am. Anyways, with a book like this where I can understand the story without knowing the words, I don't go back and look them up until the very, very end of the story. And in this case, I did not have time to look up all of the words before it was time to go back to work. And since I pretty much understood the story, I don't know when or if I'll go back and finish it. So that's today. What time is it? It's time for lunch. So I don't actually feel like using any brain power today, but I will still sort of ish study. But on those days, I just do passive studies. I brought my book just in case, because you never know when you might have a change of heart and suddenly feel like studying. So it's better to have it, not need it, than need it, not have it. So on days like this, mostly what I do is like I listen to Korean music, like I said before. And like right now, ignore my like totally butchered pronunciations, but like I'm kind of thinking about pungson, which I guess is like a balloon, but in the context of the story, it was a bubble, like for gum. So it's like you make a balloon out of the gum, which is actually like really cute. But I'm also mostly thinking about, like on the way here, I was listening to Say My Name by ATEEZ, and I learned a ton of vocabulary words from that song. Like I recently found the notes I had taken on that song. I didn't translate the whole thing, just like the first like half of it. And I found those notes and I went back and I was like, I know all of these words, even though I didn't study them. It's because I listened to that song like all the time. So I'm randomly kind of thinking about the kind of words that I learned from it, which brings me to an important point that it is just as important to review the stuff you feel like you like actually know as it is the stuff that you only vaguely know or you don't know at all. If you don't review stuff, especially if you're like me and you don't have like natives that you can talk to and you're not like using Korean every day, if you don't use it, you lose it, and that is so true. I was going through some old notes I found, and there's a lot of stuff I learned that I don't even remember learning. I'm just like, when did I learn that word? And like yesterday, I was looking at these notes, and I wrote down pada, which is to suck, and I know this because a vampire eating is paramokta, a straw is pade, and taking medicine in an illegal context, like taking drugs, is 약을 pada.
약을 빨다, 빨대, 빨아먹다.
So I know this word, but I wrote it down. For whatever reason, it looked weird to me yesterday, and I wrote it down. And also, like, I learned Spanish. I took 2 years in high school and 1 year in college. And since I started learning Korean 3.5-ish years ago, I quit Spanishing, and I can't Spanish grammar at all. Like, that is totally out of my head. And as far as vocabulary goes, there's a lot that I remember, but there's also a lot of stuff I've forgotten how to say, because if you don't use it, you lose it. So it's just as important to go back and review the stuff you feel like you really, really know. In days when you don't feel like using brain power, that's a good day to just like kind of randomly, boringly flip through your old notes and just refresh yourself on stuff you already know. And if you don't feel like doing that, just listen to music, or like I do, I randomly think of vocabulary words. Like I'm trying to remind myself about pungson, so I remember that word. I don't know if it'll ever benefit me to know that word. And this doesn't always work for me either. Because like right now I find it interesting, but a few days later I might not find it interesting and I quit thinking about it and I'll lose it. So sometimes this works for me, sometimes it doesn't. So I just kind of randomly thinking about words I picked up from K-pop songs. As I'm listening to K-pop, I'm randomly translating just random words. So like that's the way I passively study on the days I don't feel like using my brain. So on Friday I had to go get my oil changed, so I read one chapter out of the culture book, and I'm kind of sad because I started writing Yogwon instead of Yogwon, so now the word for passport looks weird. But anyways, after that, I didn't feel like reading anymore, so I went back and I tried translating it into English. You silly boy. Because with the way I'm studying, like I think it would be really cool to like translate or interpret one day. And like being able to understand it in Korean and relay it back in English are different things, because sometimes the literal translation either sounds really awkward in English or it has kind of a different feeling. Like there's this word for greedy that sometimes in English a better translation would be ambitious, because greedy has a negative sound to it, but it's not always a negative sound in Korean, for example. So one example of it being difficult to phrase something from Korean to English or not making sense when translated literally is this highlighted sentence, at least for me. Like if you read it literally word for word, it's Told people like this enjoy various from Han River, can't forget memories make. I can't phrase it well, like literally, so this is what I came up with. People from Seoul can make a lot of fun memories at the Han River that they'll never forget. So yesterday I just listened to music, but today I'm watching South Korean foreigners. There's enough captioning to tell what's going on even if you can't understand, so for me it's good listening practice. But when I actively study, I take note of any kind of wording or phrasing that I find interesting. The reason I like practicing listening with this is because I don't have to really fully understand what's going on to be able to enjoy it. So I think I pretty much talked about all the ways that I study in this video aside from three things. On vocabulary, I mentioned how I like randomly translate stuff in my head or repeat a new word that I learned, hoping to remember it. Aside from that, I will also write up to 5 words that I'm interested in learning on like a sticky note, and I stick it by my desk at work so I can look at it. And I only put the Korean on there for me personally. If I have to think about it harder, what it meant, I remember it better. I think the number one way that people go wrong with learning a language is, this depends completely on your goals. If you're studying for a test, you have no choice but to like try to cram a bunch of vocab at once. But if you're learning for fun, you can focus on smaller amounts of vocab. Sometimes when people focus on too much vocab, they end up not remembering any of it at all or hardly any of it. If you need to focus on one word for like a week until you know it, do that. Cut your list. If you're having trouble, try cutting your list down to a really small chunk and see if you can learn that chunk and then move on to another chunk. It'll take trial and error to find out what works for you for learning. The second way I study is reading articles related to my job, so I learn a bunch of vocabulary words that probably won't do me any good, but at the same time I do end up learning some constructions that could be helpful to know, such as mixed in with and due to. STI due to parasite. And the third way is grammar. When I learn grammar, I write a lesson on it, and as you write, you don't have to share the lesson, like write it for yourself. When you try to explain it to somebody with the assumption that they don't know anything about it, you end up coming up with questions that you didn't even think about when you were learning it. Like you felt like you knew it, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, what about this situation or this situation? And by the time you're done writing your lesson, you end up having a better understanding of the grammar point than you did when you started. Or at least for me personally, I do. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.